stuff fairly quickly. So just talking about emergency, what do we mean? You know, power failure in your home for up to 7 days. Hopefully not that long. Down here, usually not, but you never know. Focus on the essentials. You know, you cannot live like you normally do for most people. And a lot of people forget that. During Hurricane Sandy, some woman came into the shelter and she was all upset because her generator wasn't working. When we asked her about it, it turned out she had a 2 kW generator and she was trying to run her clothes dryer. Okay.
You just take the clothes and put it over the top of the
Yes,
generator.
yeah, actually,
That'll
that's
work.
true. All right, now, so what are the things you're going to need? You may need your furnace if it's winter. You're going to want your hot water heater. You may need a sump pump. That's really important. You may need a well pump if you have one. There's also something called a septic tank lift pump that some people may have. If that goes out, that's not going to be pleasant. You want your refrigerator, a few lights, maybe an AM/FM radio, a cell phone charger, and maybe a computer with internet if internet is working.
If power goes down, you have cable vision, you don't have internet.
Right. If cable, you don't have internet, but you can still have cable even if power is down. It depends on what the break is.
That's not what we've always lost. We get cable back when power comes back on.
Yeah, but it may...
But if you have power...
No.
No.
No?
One of the things, for example, is at least some of the Cablevision boxes have backup batteries in them. And it'll stay on for 6 to 12 hours, and you can just hook up another battery. It's a 12-volt battery.
Cablevision goes out. It's their boxes go out.
They may not go out. That's what I'm saying.
That's
Maybe.
our experience.
Well, maybe. That's why the word maybe. There are situations, I know where I am during Sandy, we had cable, but we didn't have power. We could make phone calls because we have voice over IP with Cablevision, and it was still operating. One of the things to keep in mind is that with cell phones is that more and more the cell towers are not going down, or at least they're not going down until the batteries run out, which can be 48 to 72 hours. What will happen is that the cell towers will be overloaded, and it will be very difficult to make a call. But typically, you can get text messages through, because text messages take some infinitesimal fraction of the power. So your best bet is to plan on doing text messaging and figure that you're not going to be able to make calls. All right. Anyway, one of the most important things, the first thing is to know is how much power do you need. The best way to do that is get one of these kilowatts. You can get them at pretty much any hardware store. You plug it into your equipment, in one by one, into your appliances, into whatever you think you're going to run, and it tells you what power you're really going to use. And then you can add it up and decide what power you need.
It also tells you how much you will use in a day for something like a refrigerator.
Yeah. So you can leave it plugged in for 24 hours with your refrigerator, and you'll see what it's using. Now remember, of course, obviously, the amount of power the refrigerator uses in the winter is going to be a lot different than what it uses in the summer. If you have a lot of heavy, big motors in your house, sump pumps and things like that, you do want to look at the power factor, which is the volt amp versus the watts. Because you can have a situation when heavy motors start running where you're drawing very high current. Not that many watts, but very high current. And potentially high enough current
It's not just when they're running constantly. It's exactly the same as SWR, really.
Okay, so
but
it's...
while they're running, you could be drawing an extra 5 amps could trip out your breaker when you didn't need it for the power.
I think it's only a 900 watt thingy, yet it's tripping my circuit breaker. So you need to check that. Anything with motors, like some pumps, like the blowers or the circulators on your furnace, things like that.
Yeah, you can buy tuning capacitors to tune it out.
Okay. This, you can find this all over the internet, power needs for typical household items. These
they're a little dated.
Fred thinks that they're a little dated, but it depends on what you've got in your house. You know, if you've got old stuff in your house, you know,
That's too new.
yeah, you know, if you got old stuff in your house, you know, So anyway, so your stuff may be better or worse, and make sure you've identified what's a 240 volt item, like your dryer. Probably not going to be using your dryer, but you know. But the better thing is go around with a kilowatt, figure out what these things are, what you're going to need. Now, the first option, of course, is a full house generator, one of these Generacs. You hear them advertised all the time, 10 kW, 20 kW, runs off gas, you know, the piped-in gas, not propane. I guess they can run off propane.
Natural gas.
You know, but mostly off natural gas. Generators like this one here is $5,200, but typically it's going to be $15,000 with installation, especially if you have to have gas line run to your house if you don't have gas coming into the house already. Or if you need to upgrade the pipes, things like that. So it can be pretty expensive. We're not really going to talk about that.
Yes, we are. I'm going to.
Okay? Go ahead.
They, with the standing generator, just about 8 weeks ago, we had a power outage in my neighborhood, and it was hot as hell. And I was watching something on television that I wanted to watch, so it just automatically shifted over to the generator. I had the air conditioners on, watching the television, the lights were on and everything else. No problem at all. Everybody else in the neighborhood was completely dark. So they do work nice. But there's certain considerations you have to have when you put them in. Most pictures you see of these things, when they're installed, they're right next to the house. By code, they have to be at least 10 feet away from the house because they're going to generate all kinds of CO2 and things that come in. If you have a window open, they'll come right in your house. So it's very dangerous. Also, they can catch fire. If they catch fire, you can lose a house. So there are a lot of problems. They're not a problem. You just have to know that you don't install it like they show in the pictures where it's right next to the house and everything is one hunky-dory. The installation is an expensive thing, and if you're going to put one of these in, you have to get a building permit and everything else. You have to, it's all by code. And if you're going to put in a natural gas power thing, a new line. If you have existing natural gas in the house, most houses, particularly if they're old houses with new furnaces, they don't use as much gas to heat the house. So you can probably sneak by and not have to do a bigger installation with the gas supply to the house. So that's a problem. So you've got a plumber, you've got an electrician, and everything else. But when it works, it's beautiful.
So if you have an extra $15,000 hanging around,
How about maintenance costs?
Yeah, well, that's the next thing. You got one step ahead of me, Fred. These things have to be maintained. They have an exercise cycle every week. It runs for 10, 15 minutes. Mine goes on Thursdays at 12 o'clock. It's a very nice sound to hear out there when I'm having lunch, and all of a sudden, boom, and there it goes. But it's a motor. It runs it runs, and if you have say you have a power outage and it lasts a couple of days, you're going to put a lot of hours on that thing. Then you have to change the oil. You have to do other maintenance. It has a battery in it. You have to keep the battery. It has a trickle charge, but after a certain number of years, the battery has to be replaced. There are outfits that just do maintenance on these things, and they have a very good program, and their maintenance schedule is much better than what the manufacturer suggests. And when I talked with the maintenance people, they said, oh, if we do it the way they do, the oil comes out and it's all milky and everything else. He says, we change it twice a year. And if you have a long power outage, they will come and do it then. So it's not only do you have it, but then you have to get a good maintenance company, and there are lots of them around, but you got to make sure you get one that knows what they're doing. And it's changing the oil and doing all, you can do this, but you can't really maintain the unit the way it should be maintained. So that's the other aspect of it. And it's hard to get a fix on which is the best one mechanically. Kohler makes one. Generac is very, very popular, but when I got the 20 kW one, they also make a 10 or 12, I forget what it was. The motors for that are made in China. The motors for the 20 kW are made in the United States, so they can get replacement parts and stuff. That's what I was told by the people that were putting it in. I don't know what it is with Kohler and where they're manufactured. So you have to be sure you get a unit that can be fixed and maintained and kept going too, because it's something that when you need it,
Yeah.
and you don't want to. And it's nice to have the exercise cycle every week to keep it ready to go, and you don't have to think about it. It does it all.
All right, I want to cut it off here because we've got a
Okay.
lot of material to
And
cover.
they are using a lot of propane with them now rather than natural gas, if
Oh.
you don't have natural gas running up
Okay.
there.
There was one thing that I found on the Generac site, not intended for use, blah, 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 or in life support applications. So just watch that for that. All right.
That sounds like they have a lawsuit and they're covering.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So the next thing is small portable generators. Typically, they're in the $400 to $1,800 range, typically 4,000 to 7,500 watts.
I said that looks like ours.
Okay. They're gasoline or propane powered. A lot of these things weigh over 100 pounds. You want a wheeled carriage because a lot of them don't come with wheels. Good luck. Some are 120, some are 122/40. Many of them do not give you good quality power if you're going to be running electronics. You know, they're great for motors, they're great for refrigerators, things like that. But if you think you're going to be running electronics, you want to look at the total harmonic distortion, and you really want it 5% or less. And a lot of them don't give you that information. You kind of have to search. Okay? And don't run appliances on the wrong voltage. You know, either way. Bill?
Is it possible to convert the engine from gasoline to propane or back again?
There
Yes,
are
it is, but
kits.
it's not that easy to do, to bring it back.
Yeah, there are kits, but I don't know how
The
easy or hard it
tri-fuel
is.
units.
No, the question is he wants to convert. He doesn't want to try, he doesn't have a tri-fuel. You can buy some now that do all three, or do 2 or 3, but if you have one and you want to convert it, you can. There are kits to do it. It's not easy.
And when they say 4 to 7,500 watts, that is maximum.
All right, we're covering that. So, okay, so when they talk, there in the ads, you always see all sorts of crap. Okay, there are 2 numbers that they should give you. One is they'll call it startup or starting or peak or maximum or surge. That's the maximum that it can put out for a minute or 2. So, for example, when a motor starts up, because a motor when it's starting up will typically draw more power. Then there's what they call the continuous rated running steady state. That's the maximum for continuous operation. And even that number is not really the maximum for continuous operation on most of these, as you'll see. So for example, here's a typical listing on Amazon. It's a 6,875 watt, and it says reliable 5,500 watt power supply. In other words, it's not a 6,875 watt generator, it's a 5,500 watt generator. So just remember that. Now, most of these generators, most of these small generators, if you're going to be running it for more than a half an hour at the max, you don't want to run it at the max continuous rating. You want to run it at no more than half the max continuous rating. These things are just not made to keep running at full power, at full continuous power for more than 30 to 60 minutes, especially in the summer. So you really don't want to run it for more than 30 to 60 minutes. Also, when they give you fuel consumption numbers, look very carefully. The fuel consumption numbers will almost always be at half load, except when they're at quarter load. And when you go from half load to full load, it's more than a double in terms of fuel consumption, much more than a double. So just be real careful. A lot of these small generators like the Honda are given a quarter load, so they can have a really nice low number. Be careful with that. The more powerful the generator, the more fuel you need. Duh. All right, an 8,000 watt generator, the typical ones that are out there on Amazon right now, will burn about 15 gallons of gas a day at half load. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cans. 6 2.5 gallon cans. That's whatever it is, however many, 42 cans for a week, for a 7-day period. Can you get that much gas?
Not only that, the problem is even if you have that much gas and you're out longer than 1 day,
Yeah.
the gas stations are all out.
Right, well, yeah, if you have 6
they're
cans
not
of
even
gas,
pumping gas.
but at the end of the day, what are you
You're
going to do?
done.
You'd have to have 42 cans of gas to go for a week.
Well, what we found too, luckily, is different areas are different, so you can drive out of your area and find a gas station.
Maybe.
With a long line.
Yeah, but maybe, okay. So, if you can reduce the load, you reduce the amount of gas. So here's the first step. Just, you decide, I'm not gonna run an air conditioner, I'm not gonna run my microwave or stereo, whatever. Now you're down to a 6 kW generator, which is 5 cans of gas. Then you can take it further. Control when appliances are on, selective load. For example, even in the summer, you don't have to have your refrigerator running more than about an hour every 4 hours. A lot of refrigerators can go an hour out of every 8 hours. If yours can, it's time for a new refrigerator, period. Furnace typically can be off 1 hour out of every 4 in the winter, actually more like 2 hours out of every 4. So you can alternate running the furnace and running the refrigerator. Things like that. You can get this with a little bit of intelligent planning, you can get down to a 4 kW generator. Or maybe even something below that.
If your equipment's new, you can get way below.
If your equipment's new, you can get way below. Get down to 2 or 3 gas cans. After Sandy, we were running our generator. We had to run it for 2.5 days, and we went through 3 cans of gas over 2.5 days because we were shutting stuff off. In fact, overnight, we just shut the generator off entirely. Now, of course, Sandy was a nice, it was warm, so we didn't have to run the furnace, and we didn't run the refrigerator. We ran the refrigerator 1 hour out of every 8. And we got along fine. We got 3 cans of gas for 2 days. Probably could have done even better. And now there's all sorts of new stuff coming that takes less power. Fred's going to talk about that.
Yeah, well, the lowest hanging
Wait a minute,
fruit-
Fred, he has a question.
Are you going to mention transfer switches?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, because it's some new technology there. Yeah, the lowest hanging fruit, of course, is LEDs. You should have LED flashlights. You shouldn't have paraffin candles. The LEDs, you can get the flashlights for $1. You can get some nice camping lanterns. I have one that's rated at 30 days if you have it at the lowest setting. And then there's some nice flat ones. So they're really handy because if it goes out at night, you're not going to be able to start your generator or do anything else without light. New TVs, the small LED TVs, are like 25 watts, and if you hook it to an outside antenna, that may be what you have to watch until cable comes on. Some of the other areas, if you have a generator big enough to run your AC or a heat pump, and new federal standards are the minimum legal is 13. My experience is that if you have an old AC system that needs replacing, consider putting in an AC combination with heat pump with a 16 or 17 rating. There's a lot of additional features, plus they're much quieter. They have self-diagnostics. The thermostats are now all smart. Of course, some of a smart thermostat can cost as much as $500 for some of the systems, but then it's all connected, or sometimes only 100, and they're all Wi-Fi connected and internet. So I had a guy at work who put one in on my recommendation, and he goes crazy because all day long he's checking his temperatures at home.
Or this is one of the smartest thermostats going. Move it up, move it down.
The fact is that some of the smart thermostats can vary the cycle and level such that you can do extra dehumidification during the summer and whatnot. I'm not going to go into the details because HVAC is a lecture all in itself.
Actually, in New York, Confused Edison is offering you the new thermostats at no charge, so they can lower it when they have to.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I have one at work that saved me a ton of money, and I only paid $100 for it, and it paid for itself in a couple of months in that particular case. Some pumps. Well, there are a couple of things. The conventional ones that we talked about, it's a good idea to get a tuning capacitor for it if you're running off a generator so that you're not wasting current on on things which you don't want to have it trip out when it has enough power. There
My
are,
grandfather taught us, live on a hill.
yeah.
You don't need a sump pump, right?
Yeah, there's a matter,
Lived on a hill, we've never had.
yeah. Now,
Brandon Light.
there are, but they are, for certain circumstances, you can get sump pumps, backup sump pumps with a battery supply. They probably aren't going to get you out of a really deep thing. Jet pumps is a thing you can get called a cellar saver that you hook up if you have water, city water, for example. It's a little tiny jet pump. You sit it on the floor, hook a hose up, run it out your cellar window. If you are on a hill, you run your hose so that the end of the hose is now below where you are. You get it started, and then nature just takes it all out for you.
Hill.
Yes. Yeah, I live on a hill, and okay, these
That's
are
the sump, it's not the, the sump is just water, it's not
Right.
the waste.
No,
Yeah.
no, I know.
yeah.
Because there's some.
Yeah, the thing is that
It's gonna pull.
John mentioned the problem with you, if you have to pump uphill to your septic field, which my next door neighbor does. That's an important thing to have working. It was because I didn't have the problem. I didn't think to put it on the list. He did. Cooking. Now, if you happen to have natural gas or propane, you can grill your stuff. The two most, if all you have is electricity, the two most efficient ways of getting the electricity into your food, so to speak, cooking it, is the microwave, which is pretty efficient, and then induction. And I have an induction thing, and I love it. It doesn't take very much power. You have a very precise setting. The only thing about induction is you have to have a set of cookware that has a magnetic base. Go ahead.
Now, propane and gas, you can't do that inside the house.
No, you can't. Or you
Well,
should.
you have-
Well, gas, you have a gas stove.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We used to have alcohol stoves on the boat. Why? I've looked for those. Those you can cook indoors.
Well, anything that's burning has to have enough ventilation.
Well, ventilate, right, but the propane, there's more than just ventilation.
The alcohol stoves, you can still get at some camping stores. Bill Coleman.
They're hard to
Yeah.
find.
Bill
Yeah,
Coleman.
we used to have sterno. Remember sterno? You can still get it.
Yeah, I like the alcohol.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bill.
I improvised an alcohol stove when the sterno, during Tropical Storm Gloria,
You're not talking about one of these.
when the sterno ran out, I used a can, I punched an X-shaped hole in the lid, put a cotton wick through and filled it full of rubbing alcohol, and it did just as well as sterno. The problem with alcohol stoves is they don't give you much heat.
Yeah.
I remember one camping trip when I was trying to
I
heat
figured
some
there had to be a
coffee,
reason. I-
make some coffee with an alcohol.
Alcohol
proposition
per
like
pound.
this.
Yeah.
And she made me go to building, all the work of building a fire. Alcohol is not efficient.
The heat content.
It's your heat content. That's why when you get alcohol in your gasoline, it cuts down on your miles per gallon because per physical unit, the heat content is not as great.
Plus, it's just a damn waste of Johnny Walker, you know?
Now, when I was a kid, I used to make my own, and
right, let's
that's
go.
that's something else.
Well, see, I like that reason. If you can make your own alcohol, which you can,
Yeah.
and use it for these kind of, then that's.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I don't think it's really efficient, and I'm not going to tell you what I used it for.
Go.
Anyhow, well water, and this is something, and I learned this the hard way because I went and had my well fail. Typical wells will fail somewhere in the 10 to 12 year range, and mine was just in that range. And of course, it goes on a Saturday. You have to call somebody up. It's an emergency service and all that. And the guy comes out, and I asked, I said, gee, how come they don't have electronic ones? And he says, oh, yes, they do. And they're really great because you don't need the tank anymore. An electronic well pump is set so that it provides a constant pressure, essentially. and it just has a little 1 gallon snubbing tank. And then they're great. And he told me about that, and he said, unfortunately, I don't have the right voltage for you to put in, so I have to wait 10 years before I can go to an electronic well pump. The interesting thing
Well,
is...
by then they'll be even better.
Yeah, they probably will. The funny thing was, about 3 weeks later, I'm watching This Old House, and what do they display? The latest thing, electronic well pumps. If I'd only seen that a month earlier. The other thing is if you're on a well, you want to use as little water as possible. And the new toilets, there are very good toilets. The one I like is the Niagara 1.3 gallon flapperless. And the reason I like it is that the filling cycle is easy. You just pour water into a little dump tank on the top. And when that's filled, bing, and you get exactly what you need.
Idea, Fred.
Okay, I've just got the refrigerators. The modern refrigerators don't
No, you
take...
can continue, it's just, you don't have to describe how the comfort level of the toilet or anything.
No, I covered it. Now, Niagara makes a well-rated 0.8 gallon toilet, but I haven't, a friend of mine has one, he likes it, but I don't know how convenient it is. But it's really great if you have a cabin in the woods type thing. Modern refrigerators, mine is not a large one. It takes 145 watts, not 600. I don't think there are any around that take 600 nowadays. That's why we're saying that the most useful thing to get, that everybody should have, is one of those kilowatt units, because one, you know beforehand what your stuff actually takes. Two, when you're using the generator, you put that on your generator and you know how much your load is. At any time, you just look at the numbers and you say, okay, I'm running a little high, maybe I better turn something off. There are refrigerators, they're not camping, they're a little larger, but not huge. They run on 43 watts, but they cost $1,500, and they're not self-defrosting. Now, the one thing you have to realize on a refrigerator, the defrost cycles on most of them are electric heaters, and they take about a kilowatt for 20 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day. Depends. Some are once a day, some 2 or 3. So those are some of the things that you have to consider. And you have to, and so when you're running the refrigerator, you monitor the power, because if it's in a defrost cycle, you may have to shut something else off.
Bill has a question?
Yeah, are there any Peltier effect refrigerators on the market?
Yes, there are. They sell them for camping. Unfortunately, they are not very efficient in terms of the amount of power they consume. But the thing about the Peltier effect is you could hook it up either way, so you could either use it to keep, they're usually made to keep things either hot or cold, so you reverse the battery if you want it, depending whether you want to have the stuff inside hot or cold, and they're usually pretty small.
And can you compound the Peltier junctions to get more cooling?
Well, your problem is that it's not going to gain, your efficiency limited by the type of material, and they have some more exotic materials to improve the Peltier effect. It's one of those dreams for, my father told me about it, that when he was young, they were trying to figure out how to do it efficiently. But it's an interesting thing, and they do make Peltier effect coolers for computers for the gamers sometimes. Okay, you want to go to the next
And
one?
unfortunately, most refrigerators, you have no way to turn off the defrost cycle.
Nowadays, it used to be it was easy.
Yeah. Okay, so propane power generators are less common, but they're certainly available. Typically, a 4,000 watt will run 1 to 1.2 pounds of propane per hour at half load, typically. Again, you got to check the generator you buy. So that comes out to about 1.3 standard tanks per day, or 9 standard tanks a week. That's actually not bad, because propane stores better than gasoline. You can just throw some tanks in your, not in your basement, but in your garage, or if you have a shed, and you can get 100-pound tanks. There are also tri-fuel generators, which use gasoline or propane or natural gas.
I noticed when they were showing a lot of pictures about the thing down in Florida and down in the islands, the shelves were cleaned out of propane tanks, and that's the first time I've ever, usually you see people with gas tanks.
Well, that
But
and
the number of propane tanks that went up.
probably down there, people are getting it for their burners so they can
Yeah,
cook food.
yeah, they're probably using it for
Yeah, for
multiple
that too.
purposes. But
So-
I mean, I never saw so much stuff
Yeah.
going out of a store like propane tanks. Like
Then the only question is whether or not you can, in the area you're in, is it going to be easier to refill your gas or refill your propane? Well, actually, if you can have a 100-pound propane tank, that may be your best option, because that'll give you a couple of days.
Look, that house,
So,
yeah.
do not backfeed the generator output into one of your wall outlets. Don't take the output of the generator and just plug it into one of your wall outlets. It's called backfeeding. There's a good chance you'll set your house on fire. Not a good thing. Also, if you do that and you haven't disconnected your house from the grid, you're going to be feeding power back out into the grid. Your neighbors will love you for about 10 minutes until your generator burns up. And if you're really unlucky, there'll be a lineman working on the line when you're doing this. So please don't backfeed.
How do you do it so you don't do it?
Well, I'll show you one way. I mean, the first thing is
There's
you
two
should
ways.
know for your house how to disconnect.
Oh, we have a thing.
Yeah,
We
so
do one or the other.
right off the bat, if you know how to disconnect your house from the grid, that prevents it from getting out into the grid, but don't backfeed because your house is still in danger. Okay. The best thing is what's called a transfer switch. A transfer switch gets hooked up to your junction box, and what happens is when the switches are in one position, you're feeding off of the power coming in. When the switches are in the other position, you're feeding off your generator. Your generator plugs into that there, and then you're feeding off your generator. It's called a transfer box. Have an electrician put it in. It's well worth it. Now, Fred is just absolutely fanatical about these interlocks, which are real pieces of crap metal that you put on your box over here so that when you throw the power to disconnect from the grid, some metal pieces move over some of the circuit breakers, ostensibly closing the circuit breakers.
You can't, what it does, it prevents you from having both sets on at the same time. Your main input, your power line input, or your generator input, only one or the other can be on. You can't have
The
them both.
problem is anybody with a 25-cent screwdriver can bypass the interlock.
Well, it's...
No, actually there are, I did some research on it. There have already been major lawsuits against the people who make these interlocks because it's very easy to bypass the interlock. People have bypassed them with screwdrivers, they bypass them with any long pointed thing. These interlocks sound good. Do it right, get a transfer switch. And have an electrician do it.
Actually, I want to emphasize,
Yeah.
if you've got to flip your main breaker when you run a generator, you're absolutely doing it wrong. It's very, very dangerous.
No, it's a
Yeah.
transfer.
Yeah, you've got to
Yeah,
use transfer switch.
use the transfer switch.
Extremely
please.
dangerous otherwise.
We had an electrician.
Okay, couple of other points. RTFM, everybody knows what that means, right? Okay. Ground it. They don't like being rained on. Don't put it in your garage. Keep it away from your windows. There was the famous case during Irene. No, that period near Irene, there were some heavy, really bad windstorms, not during Irene, but around that time. And there was a family up in the Hartford area who put their generator in their garage. They said, okay, we understand, we got to watch out for the fumes. So they went and they got a little table fan to blow the fumes out of the garage. So there was a 35 or 40 mile an hour wind blowing the fumes into the garage with one of these little table fans trying to blow the fumes back out of the garage. Guess who won? Guess which wind won? You can just, if you don't have too many things to run, you can just connect some extension cords from the generator and plug your refrigerator into the generator. If that's all you're going to do. If you're going to do that, get very, very heavy extension cords. Because you got a long distance, so you're going to have a lot of loss in the extension cord. You're going to have a lot of current in the extension cord. Really heavy duty. The orange or yellow stuff that's like 50 bazillion amp.
Well, you want either 12 or 10 wire.
Yeah,
in the
12 or
extension.
10 gauge wire, yeah.
I usually prefer to get 25-foot pieces because otherwise, if you get a 100-footer, just too damn heavy.
Yeah. But you want to minimize the length of that run. And when you're refilling your generator, no smoking. People do that all the time. Remember, these things are hot. Wait a couple of minutes before you let it cool off before you refill it. There are people who try to refill them when they're running. The generator is hot, whoosh, and away you go. Okay. In terms of portable operations for ham radio, that's what you need to know. Thank you very much. Good night. For those of you who don't know, that's the standard Honda 2000 watt that we use for field day.
How do you ground that, John?
Huh? There is a ground port. I'm not sure where it is. I don't remember offhand. And we, for field day, we take a ground rod and we just put it right into the ground.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much do they cost?
Well, the Honda 2000 costs about $1,000.
You can get them for 800.
Yeah, 800 on QFC, there's an ad for them.
Yeah, that Mayberry
Mayberry.
or RFD. No, Mayberry. So actually, they're selling them for more than 800, but it's like $899. You know.
Take $100 off.
Yeah.
Well, they ship it with no oil, and you have to remember to put the oil in first.
Well,
all of them are that
Okay,
way.
all of them ship. All right, seriously, these inverter generators have high quality power output. They're lighter and smaller in size in general, generally higher fuel efficiency. Most of them have some sort of adjustable throttle where it adjusts the generator speed to the load. So if you're not operating that much load, the generator is running slower, which means you're using less gas. That can be a 40% saving in gas right there. Can be. Generally quieter. They can be run in parallel. So if you put two 2,000 watt generators in parallel, you get 4,000 watts. And they can also be run with a battery boost, which means you've got a battery in parallel.
With an inverter. Battery and an inverter.
Battery and inverter, sorry. So that, for example, when a motor kicks in, the battery takes up that extra draw while the motor is getting up to speed.
And Yamaha makes one for the marine trade where they have a battery built in for that. But it's an expensive unit.
Yeah. So and there are a number of these out there now which are getting decent reviews. No, the Honda is the gold standard, but some of these are pretty
How
damn
come I
good.
don't see Harbor Freight?
No, there's more than that. Okay, I just took a couple.
Yeah.
All right, so now let's talk about batteries. Batteries is an area where there's been a massive change in the technology over the past couple of years.
Ongoing change.
An ongoing change. There are basically three types of batteries to think about for the moment: lithium ion, the standard sealed lead acid, and what's called the lithium iron phosphate. BioNO is a big name in that. John Colatai, Ham Source, he sells these things. So looking at them, look at the prices. Now, by the way, A123 actually went out of business, and the name was bought by a Chinese company. So be careful. So the lithium ion, look at that, $135 for a 4.6 amp hour battery. Standard AGM or sealed lead acid, $25 for a 9 amp hour battery. BioNO $95 for an 8 amp hour battery. The lithium ion and the lithium iron have a lot more recharge cycles. You can recharge them more before you have to get rid of it. So basically, you can look at the numbers later, but what it comes down to is that at the minimum rated life, the BioNO is actually lower cost than the AGM, because you're going to have to replace the AGM or the sealed lead acid. You're going to have to replace it more frequently. So you're actually a little bit better off.
What kind of batteries are these for?
Well, these run.
These are good for Go kits and whatnot.
Go kits, or you're operating for
Universal power supplies.
things like that. I mean, the sealed lead acids will go up to 100 amp hours and more. So
you got deep discharge and whatnot.
So you can operate for quite a long time. You can operate a lot of stuff off of them. Although we'll see, there's a
What about
trick.
charging rates on them?
Don't know. I can't answer that. I think the charging rates are about the same, but this is my understanding. but I can't say that for sure.
The big thing is what's coming in the next few
Okay.
years.
So, looking at it though, this is a guy, KF7IJZ, who's done some really superb work. He's on YouTube. When you look at the discharge on these batteries, what he did was he put them under load and he said, I'm going to discharge them until they get to about 11.5 volts, because that's where ham radio is going to cut out. Okay? So if you look at it, the sealed lead acid, or AGM, that at a 10 amp load, it cut out after a quarter of an hour. It got down to the point of 11.5 volts after a quarter of an hour. The lithium ion came down after half an hour, and the bioNO came down after 3/4 of an hour. That's quite a difference. So what happens is the bioNO is $129 per hour for operating. The AGM is $125 per hour, because you have to buy 3 of them to do what this battery will do. So or actually 4 of them. Because look at the runtime. On the sealed lead acid, you got 12 minutes on that, whatever it was, an 8 amp battery, 8 amp hour battery. So it can pay to spend more money at first to buy something like this, because it's going to give you a longer run before the voltage drops. Looking at a 1 amp draw, it's even better. 4.5 hours on these guys, 7.5 hours on the bioNO. These guys, you'd need 2 batteries to make up what one of these would do. And he did a whole bunch of others, but he did a draw where he was drawing 1 amp for 60 seconds and then 10 amps for 30 seconds, like in a contest. I'm listening, transmitting, listening, transmitting, listening, transmitting. And the bioNO went to 1.5 hours. You can see the numbers 1 and 0.5. So again, the bioNO, even though it's a lot more expensive than a sealed lead acid, actually comes out to pretty close to in terms of dollars per hour. And 1 battery lasted a lot longer than the sealed lead acid. So just to keep in mind. Joe.
I happen to own a few bioNOs, and from my experience, the charging is much faster than SLA.
Okay.
They do require a special charger, and they do go on sale before Christmas.
Actually, John Colatai, N10LO ham source, is running a sale at the moment. I did communicate with him about the charging, and one thing he said, I asked him, what about if I want to charge it off of a power gate? I want to charge it off of my generator. If I need this special charge, he said, with the bioNO, if you want to just charge it off your generator, it'll get up to about 90% power, 90% charge. It won't go from up to 100%. And they're looking at retooling the power gate. He sells something called an easy gate, and he's looking at retooling that so it will charge these bioNOs. So there's that. Okay, anyway, this guy, KF7IJZ, he's on YouTube. He's done a lot of work analyzing batteries. Some very interesting stuff. Now, as Fred will tell you, there's a lot of interesting stuff coming down the line. You have anything specific?
Well, yeah, everybody has heard of the Gigafactory Musk is building, and he is trying to get the cost per kilowatt hour down into the couple of $100s, eventually down below $200, because the same batteries could be used both for electric vehicles, and that would bring the cost of the electric vehicle down. Plus, he has a unit that he's shown where you mount it on a wall and you have a bunch of the batteries in it, and that gives you a couple of days supply, depending how much money you want to spend. It's still going to be not, I won't say cheap, but that's the direction. At the same time, another company got the factory that A123 Systems had the name went to China, but the factory stayed here, and they've developed a plated lithium battery, which may be even better than what Musk is working on. And they are retooling the equipment that A123 had to make this plated lithium battery, and we'll have to keep our fingers crossed and see how that comes out.
So, Joe?
Just one more thing, the bioenzyme batteries are about a third of the weight of the SLA.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was in that chart.
yeah.
I didn't really cover that for this. Although, actually, you can see here, amp hours per pound. Bioenno is 3 amp hours per pound. The AGM is 40.41, 4/10.
That's why they're great for Go kits.
Yeah. So, anyway, and like I said, Kolotai has a sale on right now. You know the ham source? www.hamsource.com. Okay, so let's talk about... oh, I know, because I happened to be over here when I clicked. Huh. All right, let's talk about solar. What's happening with solar power. There's a lot of crap out there. And I use the word crap advisedly. This is typical of the crap. Solar panel mobile power bank, 23,000 milliamp hours. The minute you see milliamp hours, what it means is that this thing is primarily a battery. And the solar panel is being used to charge the battery. On this one, if you look very, very carefully at the information, it turns out that the output from the solar panel is all of 150 milliamps. So how long does it take to charge a 23,000 milliamp hour battery with 150 milliamps? The answer is 153 hours to charge. Okay, real useful. And you'll notice it comes with an AC power supply to charge up the battery that's in this thing. Now, for that $85, you can just buy a battery. Actually, for a lot less than the $85, you can just buy a battery. So,
Can you get a rechargeable battery?
well, there are
The Eneloop.
battery packs that you can buy for less than $85 that are like 20,000 amp hours, and you just charge them off your AC, because guess what? That's what you're going to do with this thing. Now, if you look carefully, there are ones that are better, but a lot of these small ones, it's a joke. It really is a joke.
Oh, they're making a lot of money.
Yeah.
People who don't know.
Especially if you have, a fairly modern smartphone, which is going to need 5,000 or 6,000 milliamps to recharge. And so,
I just got an invention.
yeah, uh-oh.
Well, I'll tell
Okay,
you when I
tell
do the
them later.
last part.
Okay, so the next thing is now our solar generators. These things sound impressive. Read this quickly. Refuel from wall. Car or sun, car charger, and solar charger sold separately. It's a battery. That's all it is. It's a $230
Oh,
12 amp hour battery.
with an inverter.
Yeah, with an inverter. I can get a 12 amp hour battery. I can get a 12 amp hour Bioenno with an inverter for less than $230. Okay. It has 12 volt output. It has AC output. It has USB output. If you don't need the inverter, fine. But it's a battery. But it's a generator.
What kind of amps can it deliver?
Oh,
I-
it's 12
I-
ampere
it's-
hour.
It's on the specification. I don't remember. I didn't put it down. It's a couple of amps, but that's about it.
Couple of amps?
Yeah. Okay. Now here's something that's getting there. This is a solar charger, 28 watt with dual USB port. This thing will put out 2.1 amps and 1 amp, which is exactly what your, any charger you buy these days will put out. Put it in the sun and it will recharge your phone at the same rate as your regular charger will. And, for $65, that's not bad. Now they're starting to get, this makes sense. There's all sorts of these things, and they run up to $200, and they run down to $50, and you have to look, and you have to see what they're giving you.
You know what
Okay.
where the big market is for these?
What's that?
Africa.
Okay. Okay, now then there are a lot of solar panels. Originally, people were selling solar panels without the charge controller. A solar panel puts out anywhere between 5 and 20 volts. The purpose of a charge controller was to limit the upside, so if you're trying to charge a 12-volt battery, you're not trying to charge it with 20 volts and blowing up the battery. Okay, so make sure that you're getting a charge controller, or make sure you know if you're not getting a charge controller. This one has a charge controller on the back side of the battery, on the back side of the panel. So it's 100 watts. It's good for 12-volt battery charging on a boat, etc., etc. Not bad for $120 for off-the-grid charging. Okay? Huh? If you're going to use a solar panel for your ham radio, work it through the battery. Don't put the output of the charge controller directly into your radio, because remember, the voltage is going to go up. It'll only go up to 12, sure, but there are times when it's going to go down, like if a cloud comes over the sun. So, in the middle of transmitting, blip, you're off. Blip, on, blip, off, on, blip. Not good for your rig, certainly not good for your QSO. All right, solar power for the home. Mr. Fred.
Yeah. Okay, we're putting this in because sometimes a little confusion. There's 3 basic configurations for solar power on your home. The one you usually see advertised heavily is called grid tied. There's no batteries, there's no storage. All it does is that it pumps or whatever it generates into the grid. And if you have net metering, then it's subtracted, it's running your meter backwards essentially. But if the grid goes down, what do you have? You got all these solar panels, all ready to provide power, and you ain't got nothing. Okay, now there are 2 things you can do. The first thing is what's called islanding. Basically, they'll have a special inverter in there and a means of providing, typically it's 1.5 kilowatts, which you could use for some of your stuff while the sun is shining. It's not a replacement for a generator unless you're a real rugged outdoors type person. And I guess somebody, John put in, some may have a battery so you can get a little bit of smoothing. Then of course is off-grid. Off-grid systems need a lot of batteries. They are still pretty expensive. This is where Musk is trying to cut the price down from 20 or 30,000 down to less than 10,000 to make it so that you can take care of all your needs, go through the normal cycles of ups and downs, the vagaries of the thing, and these are just starting. The specialty cases. There are people with a lot of money that have them. I have a business partner that's an appraiser, and he's been in 2 houses, very fancy houses this year, where he's gone down to the basement and there's a big room filled with batteries. And so people with a lot of money are building battery rooms that will get them through anything. But for anybody here, as far as I know, except maybe Ernest, we'll have to wait.
I got a generator, I don't need that.
Let's see, I think there was a, Fred, yeah? Go ahead.
How close are we to, as I understand it, the efficiency of these is really pretty negative. How close are we to getting better
Maybe that's on the
solar
next.
that will do the broader range?
That's on the next slide.
Okay, okay, there, yeah. Now there are, okay, the next slide. Okay, why don't do that?
Okay.
Some
What
of you.
about RF noise?
RF noise is a problem, and I meant to mention it back at the beginning with the LED bulbs. I had it. Some hams have reported that they've gotten LED bulbs that did generate interference. I haven't. The ones I have not been a problem. An interesting fact, the old Edison vacuum zigzag filament bulbs, were super RF generators. And I don't know if anybody remembers the early days of TV when those things were still around. And you turn one on and you got a bar crawling up and crawling down the screen, or up, I forget which way, but I think it went up the screen. But it was a very interesting phenomenon. They were putting out a lot of RF right in the television band. I won't go into why, but they did. All right. You can lease, where you pay a monthly rent, and they usually try to structure it so that you're paying less than what you'd pay if you were paying the power company what the power company wants to charge. The advantage is that you've locked in a rate for like 20 years or 25 years. Of course, your downside risk is that everybody else gets solar power. The power price drops so low that they're giving it away, and you're still having to pay for it. But of course, they've put in the investment and did all the work. A large part of, by the way, of installation has to do with the paperwork and getting permits and a whole bunch of stuff. The panels themselves are cheap now. You can do a conventional loan, or you can just buy it outright yourself. And John says you should get a warranty at least on the equipment. People I know one person that has solar power in his house. He had one panel fail last year. He had a microinverter system, which means that every panel has a separate monitoring on the internet, and so you could find out exactly when the panel failed. Rather interesting thing. Next slide, and just go over the basic panel types and what's happening. Right now, you can have the silicon monocrystalline or polycrystalline panels. The monocrystalline is a little more efficient, and the last record I saw was 24.1, but that was selected cells. But you can get installations that are 20 to 23% if you're getting what are called grade A panels. A lot of the older panels were like 15, 16, 17% efficient. In the laboratory, they have made multi-layer panels which can get up over almost 50% actually. I'm hoping that within 10 years they'll be manufacturing stuff at 40% efficiency, because that opens up a lot more places where you could put panels. If you don't need half as many panels, you don't need as big a roof to take care of your house. There's also organic, and there's a company that is starting up to make large volume organic, which is sort of the reverse of, you've heard of OLED TVs? Well, it's the same technology working in reverse. Efficiencies are in the neighborhood of 10%, but it comes off, you just make miles and miles of this clear plastic film. And my idea is you get the clear plastic film, a piece to fit on your iPhone, hook it up to the thing, and you hold the iPhone, it's getting charged from the sunlight while you're using it. Thought for the future. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, off-grid, the batteries are pretty expensive. And the Tesla is, of course, the Gigafactory. And then there's the other company, I forgot, up in Massachusetts. And there are a whole bunch of others, because lithium batteries are great for weight, efficiency. Their problems are to make them so they can take a charge fast, especially if you're using an electric car. You don't want to have to wait 4 hours because your car ran out of electricity. And safety, and safety, as everybody's saying, if you buy cheap lithium batteries like some company did with their phones recently.
They may or may not be Samsung.
Yeah. In fact, there was a case where the guy had it go off in his pocket on an airplane or something. Just yesterday, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, so there's a lot of hope. There's the multi-layer things. There's several materials. One of them that's actually fairly inexpensive and common. And the reason for multi-layers is that a photocell uses one little slice of the spectrum, or one section, to do its work. It doesn't work above or below. But if you could have several layers that are transparent hooked together, so that one's taking one part of the spectrum, one another, and one a third, then you can increase the efficiency. So,
What about the weight of the panels on the roof, particularly during a snowstorm?
well, the snow's going to be a lot heavier. The panels themselves are fairly light. I mean, you know, a big panel you can lift up, I don't know, 25 pounds or so. It's the panels.
You can have 500 pounds on the roof.
You know, well, the thing is the snow, the roof has to hold the snow anyhow.
Yeah, but if you're, I'm talking about in addition to the snow. You install
Yeah,
the
well, the thing is that you're talking about much less than 1 pound per square foot for the panels.
Bring in engineers to get.
Yeah, they have to. I mean,
Put it
It
up
gets
on.
snowing.
Yeah, but you see how those engineers run trains.
there are situations where I have run into roofs that were not properly constructed. I don't know if anybody, does anybody remember Roxbury Church in Stamford? It burned down some years ago.
Didn't that burn down?
Yeah, and and the problem was I was the last guy in it before it burned down, and I got investigated. Son of a gun.
I
Put it a
would,
little lighter.
Fred, he's recording, you better have him, Bill, you had a question?
Yeah, Fred,
What?
what about lifetime? When do these things poop out? Is there any plan for disposal, recycling?
Oh, the lithium
replacement
batteries or the
Of
panels?
of the cells?
The cells nowadays are good for at least, they're normally guaranteed 25 years. In the early days, when the early cells were made, there was a phenomenon, a poisoning phenomena where they could start failing after only a few years. They figured out what was causing that. So now they pretty well know how to make the cells, most of the cells last long. Now, one club member who has some solar power had one panel go bad. It dropped down to half power. Well, it showed up on the computer map showing that it was putting out 140 watts instead of 250 like the other panels were. So he had to replace it. So some panels do fail, but they're normally warranted 25 years.
What about disposal at the end of the 25?
And recycling.
That's the worry for the next homeowner. No,
If you don't know, then the answer is you don't know.
right now it's not a problem because the disposal. But obviously at some point they will. But they shouldn't be difficult to dispose of. I mean, they're mechanically easily crushable. You got aluminum edging. You'd have a recovery operation to recover.
They're not poisonous or anything.
No.
A couple of months back, there was an article in QST, a guy who had put solar panels on his roof, and he was expounding on all the
Yes.
different...
There were a couple of different articles.
There's been a lot of
Last year.
interference and all kinds of crazy stuff going on with the panels on your roof and your radio and your antennas and everything else.
Yeah,
So
it depends on the type of inverters that you're using and whatnot.
The first article had a lot of problems. The second article, different type of panel, different type of system, very little RF energy created.
These are all problems that get taken care of. I'm not recommending that anybody rush into to solar power, but keep a close eye on it, and also if your house is really good for it, it's something that's really worth considering. And if you want to be off grid, then you'll have to wait a few years.
Remember, we're talking here about solar power on your house. We're not talking about big solar power generating stations like out in the deserts or that are springing up all over Europe. Those are pretty efficient. They work very well. This is just the stuff you can put on your house. Right now, the situation is that there are a lot of people, a lot of contractors, a lot of companies that have jumped into this thing because they know that people are going to jump on it without understanding what they're doing. There are some that know what they're doing. There are some that are reliable and reputable.
But a lot of these people, I wouldn't touch it right now because a lot of these people have no idea, or they're purposely just going to lie to you. I had one contractor come and look at my house. One of the big names that advertises a lot. Oh yeah, the house is perfect. And I said, well, the flat areas of the roof point east and west, which means I'm not getting the sun, a lot of sun on there most of the day. Oh yeah, no, bullshit. Okay. A lot of times they just give you numbers, but the numbers aren't realistic. So, oh yeah, well if you put these in, it's going to cost you X amount per month on our lease, and you're going to be able to sell this power it's going to generate X number of kilowatts, and you're going to be able to sell that to Eversource. And when I contacted Eversource, it was, well, no, actually, we were only paying about half that. And I'm not sure that I would have been generating anywhere near what this guy said I would have been generating. This is the one where he's saying, oh, yeah, no problem that the panels aren't facing the sun.
Yeah.
So, and at any rate, because it's east-west, that means the panels on the east side will only get whatever sun they get, they'll only get for half the day, and then they'll be blocked. And the panels on the west will only get sun for half the day, and then be blocked. So the problem, there are a lot of problems they have to do with people who are cheating, with companies that are playing the old capitalist game of cheating people who don't know what they're doing.
There's one thing I want to say about panels facing west. It's a very interesting thing. If you want to get the most kilowatt hours for yourself, you want to be within 45 degrees of south. If you want to save the most energy in the summertime, west is actually superior. Now, you don't do as well, but the power company doesn't have to buy the very high peaking power during a heat wave used for air condition because of the air conditioners. So a west-facing system does the power company a lot of good because that's the most expensive power, and they're getting it cheap from you.
Great. Power company.
But in Germany, I think last year or the year before, they managed to essentially get through a summer with no peaking power. And now, when you have wind systems, you have another problem, though, called negawatts. Has anybody heard of a negawatt? A negawatt is energy that if you have a wind turbine, it may be generating a lot of electricity at night, and nobody's using it. You got to pay somebody to take your electricity because you can't store it.